Thank you for joining us on this lovely day in December for our webinar. We have a really awesome webinar coming for you tonight, and I would love to introduce our newest person on our sheep and goat team, Dr. Angela Varnum. She is a veterinarian, and she joined us earlier this year. So her official title is Extension Educator, from our veterinarian extension educator, I guess you could say. But she has a background. She was a practicing vet before she came to extension, and she worked with sheep and goats quite extensively. So this webinar actually came about. It was a requested topic, and we posed that to Dr. Angie, and she decided that she would love to take it on. So we are super excited to hear what she's got to say. So with that, I will turn it over to her. If you guys have any questions at any time, please drop those in the chat box and we will do our best to get them answered. Go ahead, Doctor.
Thanks, Brenda. It's great to see you all here tonight, and I'm super excited to give this webinar. I was saying that this was a fun one to create, so I'm hoping that I'm hitting the mark here. Would you let me know once you can see my full screen there?
It, there, we're full screen. Charge on.
Well, thanks. Uh, as Brenda mentioned, I am new to the University of Minnesota Extension team. I came from practice here in central Minnesota, where I worked with sheep and goat owners, as well as dairy and beef cattle and a few horses. And before that, I did my training out west, so more range sheep and goats are everywhere. I saw a lot of goats during my time at Colorado State University. In my current role, I'm working with sheep and goat producers as well as beef and dairy cattle producers on the extension and education side. I also have owned goats, and currently I enjoy helping other people make decisions with theirs instead of having to make decisions with my own. Uh, I'm just going to mention here seasonality, and that's going to play a part in our webinar tonight. Brenda mentioned the reason that this webinar came about was a request from a producer. I don't know if they're on here tonight or not, but welcome if you are. Why do I do the things that I do when I do them? Or what things should I be doing in specific times of the year? So for this webinar, assume that we're talking about the more traditional seasonality of small ruminant production with spring lambing or kidding and fall breeding, taking advantage of the natural fertility of these animals. You might be engaging in off-season or accelerated lambing or kidding. And if you're not, I kind of think about that as something that you might try on for size after you're already confident in husbandry skills with these species. So if you're doing fall lambing or kidding, you might think about the opposite when we get to spring and fall here. But for the majority, probably 85, 90% of people in the US, this is what our production management looks like. And of course, that's in part due because of the animal's physiology, that lambs and kids are more easier born in the spring because does and ewes are easier to get pregnant in the fall. But when we harvest, especially lambs, is pretty dependent on seasonality in the market. And like I mentioned, probably still 85% of lambs are born in the spring, but we end up with sort of a gap in the, for us, summer months here in Minnesota. So July, August especially, where the demand exceeds the supply. And so that's why we might investigate using alternative seasonality in our lambing and kidding seasons. But again, for this presentation, assume that we're kind of more traditional in our spring lambing and kidding. This is an outline of the presentation tonight. We'll go through the most impending season here for us in Minnesota at the time this webinar was recorded, all through the 4 seasons. And as I mentioned, this was by request. And so ideally this provides a little bit of incentive to you as a producer or maybe a potential producer to grab and hold on to one change you would like to make within your own operation. For that reason, I say, take a moment, pause. I'm going to turn my video off and truly pause this. I want you to grab a pen and paper. The paper can be a notebook paper, it can be the back of an envelope, back of a napkin, a post-it note, but I truly want you to grab something to write with before we get started. All right, hopefully you're back. The reason that I asked you to grab a sheet of paper is because, again, at the time this webinar is being delivered and recorded, we are facing the holiday season here in Minnesota, and I, at least myself, find myself thinking, God, there's just one more thing to do every single day in order to get ready for this busy season. And I ended up reflecting about that a little bit when it comes to raising livestock, that there always is just one more thing to get done. My challenge to you is to identify the thing that really shouldn't be the one more thing. Let something else fall to the wayside and become just one more thing in honor of adapting one new practice tonight. So that's what I want you to be ready with pen and paper for as we navigate through the 4 seasons of Minnesota's sheep and goat ownership. Let's start with winter, as we're in the throes of it right now. And what sorts of things might you keep in mind as you are preparing for that spring lambing and kidding season? I like to think of the winter season as the time to feed and give CDT. I'm trying to keep it very simple. I know we do much more than that, include survive. If we think about this in this kind of simple way of the why we put so much emphasis during the winter months here in Minnesota on feeding and CDT, my goal for you is that understanding the why gives you a little bit more oomph to do the things that you know need to be done. I won't talk much about bedding, but I don't want to let it go without saying the importance of well-bedded creatures for warmth and hygiene. But let's first talk about winter feeding. I want to highlight the importance of feeding well those does and ewes out in your barns right now because they are growing little energy drains as we speak. Of course, I mean their kids and their lambs, but we often forget that lactation or the process of creating milk is the most energy intensive time for a doe or a lamb. And the only way to provide her that energy is through the feed. Of course, here in Minnesota or North Dakota, the cold is also arriving just at the time when the ewe is trying to grow her lambs and increase her milk production. Parasites are not as visible right now. They're not being shed with quite as much fervor as they would be in the spring or the fall, but they're still there and they're contributing to this overall energy drain on the late pregnant ewe or doe. So as you head through the end of winter, don't forget about the importance of quality feed to prevent pregnancy toxemia. And of course, that is the condition which results when the energy that is being drained out of the ewe overtakes the energy that she is able to consume for herself. Here are my tips for the late gestation feeding of the late gestation ewe or doe, especially in the 3rd trimester, which for our intents and purposes we'll call the last 6 weeks of pregnancy. You have my permission to feed the highest quality hay that you have at this time, especially if you're growing some twins or triplets. You also have my permission to feed the most grain you ever do to the ewes and does at this time. Of course, making those changes gradually. A good guideline is to feed between a half and a pound of grain per 100-pound body weight of animal. So that would look like even up to 1.5 pounds for some of our larger black-faced ewes. Don't forget about not just putting down the feed, but making sure that they can access it, especially when they're wide loads, kind of maybe in worse moods than normal because they're uncomfortable and they're big. Really making sure they have more bunk space than normal at this time of their late gestation. The ewes in this picture were not pregnant at this time, and you can imagine how if they were all to get up to that forage at the same time, there wouldn't be enough bunk space for all of them to get up and eat at the same time. Just friendly reminders for you as well in the wintertime. Did you remember to put your mineral out? You probably bought it, but don't forget to put it out for those, especially for those pregnant does or ewes. It's pretty underrated to remember to purchase creep feed at this time during the winter time, but it's really the best time to get ready because pretty soon, once those lambs and kids hit the ground, you're going to have to gradually introduce them to eating solid feed, which is their creep. And you might be considering purchasing medicated feed for coccidiosis, of course, including a coccidiostat. That decision is up to the individual operation. But if you're thinking ahead, wintertime is when you're going to need to be stocking up on these feed sources for your lambs or your kids. Secondly, in the winter, don't forget about CD and T, Clostridium type C and D, and tetanus. Why do I bring this up here? This vaccine by nature requires annual boostering in sheep and goats. In adults, we know that annually is typically enough, except for in rare circumstances with higher than normal risk. Most adult sheep and goats can be boosted once annually, and those who are not breeding can be boosted at any time. Can be vaccinated at any time. A reason to consider giving CD&T in the winter for sheep and goat producers is because by vaccinating the pregnant doe or ewe, you are killing two birds with one stone. You're not only immunizing the doe or the ewe herself, but you are immunizing the colostrum, which she will be producing for her lamb or her kid. You probably already know that lambs and kids do not receive antibodies across the placenta, or they receive very few from their mother in gestation. So the majority of antibodies that that lambs and kids have for their first few months of life have to be received in the colostrum. If you time it right, you can immunize the doe or the ewe with enough time for her to start pumping some of those antibodies into her colostrum from that CD&T shot. The ideal timing to do this is 3 to 4 weeks before lambing and kidding in order to give it time to be made in the colostrum. I would be remiss if I didn't mention shearing, although this isn't helpful to the goat producers on this webinar. But shearing, of course, results in drier, cleaner, warmer animals, and bigger lambs. We think shearing increases birth weights by about 15 to 25%, which increases lamb survivability. The ideal time, there probably is no one ideal time to shear, but the window is anywhere between 2 months before you lamb to 2 weeks before you lamb. Any closer than 2 weeks before lambing just promotes a lot of undue stress on those really pregnant ewes. A reason to kind of delay your shearing up until the deadline is because, of course, shearing necessitates shelter. Most shorn ewes can tolerate temperatures down to about 32 degrees as long as they have shelter from, especially freezing rain is the toughest on them on shorn ewes. But if that ewe doesn't have reliable shelter, you could shear her, leaving behind a little bit longer stubble than you would normally, to make up for that lack of shelter. I'll get into the whys on the next slide, but at the same time of shearing, many producers will choose to examine her or treat her for lice, give CDT at that time, and you may or may not decide to test for OPP at that time. It's a pretty individual producer decision. I encourage producers to test for OPP if they know what they're going to do with those results. So if you plan to manage a positive animal, this is an ideal time to test for OPP because then you know that what you will do with that animal's colostrum once the lambs are born. You won't feed it to the lambs. I'll have this a couple of times throughout the webinar, this kind of to-do post-it note, but just keep in mind, take advantage of any time that you have your hands on does and ewes. And you could do these things at any point in time, as far as I'm concerned. Maybe when you're shearing, have your hands on them already. It's a great time to assess their body condition scores. Is your winter nutrition plan working? It's a great time to look at their eyes for FAMACHA scores. We'll talk more about those later. Feel around for lumps and bumps, especially where the lymph nodes are. And especially once you're shearing these animals, you'll have a better feel on them. And I'll say this many times, but anytime you have your hands on your animals is an okay time to check or trim their feet. Here are some reasons that you might consider shearing your ewes pre-lambing, and in fact, it's very recommended. We mentioned the first 2 points. The third point, fleece quality is probably better now than when the ewes are lactating. Shorn ewes take up a little less space at the feeder. It's a little bit counterintuitive, but shearing ewes allows a warmer barn for winter lambing. Anecdotally, I've heard that shorn ewes in an insulated barn can keep the barn above freezing, improving survivability of the lambs against hypothermia or starvation. Kind of spreads out the heat for everyone to share when the ewes are shorn. Lambs access the teat easier because they're not grabbing onto a piece of wool instead of a teat. Shearing encourages ewes to seek out protection. If they are lambing during bad weather, they will be more likely to lamb in a protected area. Ewes are easier to shear when they are pregnant versus when they are lactating for the quality of the wool. They're more active when they're shorn, so it's easier to see who's not active and who might have a health issue. And it's been said that ewes are better mothers who are shorn. They show more maternal behaviors such as cleaning the lambs. Rounding up our winter checklist, here are a few more resources from your Extension Sheep and Goat team. I included here a couple of videos. We don't go through the how-to in this presentation, but they did before me. So check out some of these resources, as well as a benefits of shearing before lambing article from Michigan State University Extension. Here's where you come in. Grab that sheet of paper and a pen and think through what is that thing that becomes one more thing for you to remember during the winter time and might sometimes get pushed off to the side until it's a little bit too late to take care of. Jot that thing down as the behavior you'd like to remember about your winter sheep and goat production goals. While you're writing that down, I invite anyone else on the sheep and goat team to chime in if you'd like from a producer standpoint of things that have worked well for them that maybe we didn't talk about in this portion. I'll just allow 30 seconds to a minute for anyone on the sheep and goat extension team who'd like to chime in with things that I neglected to mention.
Dr. Varnum, I'll touch on one that came as a quick question, kind of on grass, hay, and or feeding them if they have access to it. And so one of those things is it says how much hay to feed them, and so even in the evaluation there of 4 to 5 pounds, that's a logical spot. But then also some say that they wanted to grass finish them or maintain that. And I guess one of the things is if you're going to do that, you need to make sure that you have as high of protein and energy, or at least a supplementation, because when we're at the last part there, right, of our time before parturition, we don't want to be skimping in terms of resources that we're providing to our ewes or does. Thanks.
Thanks, Dr. Hoffman. All right, you have your takeaway from winter. Let's move on to spring, because soon enough it will come. We always trust it will. So what things do we need to keep in mind after we've made it out of the winter season and we're rounding the bend into that lambing and kidding season? I'm thinking about spring here as managing growth. But of course, it's not just about the growth of the lambs and your kids. That's one. I just tried to be memorable here. You're managing the growth of the progeny, yes, but don't forget that you're also managing parasites and pasture here. The average gestation period for a sheep or a goat is ballpark 150 days. 147 days is probably more commonly cited, but it really can range from 142 to 152 by the textbook, and way outside the range of that according to live animals who don't read the textbooks. It's probably a good practice to be ready at about 140 days, and I put up a link or terms that you can Google to find Troy Selzer's webinar on this topic about getting ready for lambing and kidding and what to have in your kits. There's that old adage of strip, dip, and clip, meaning what things do I have to remember to do once the lambs or the kids are on the ground. Strip the udder to take out the wax plug from the teat and make sure that colostrum is flowing, just kind of saving one step that the lamb or the kid has to do for you. Dip the navel, of course, in iodine, and clip the umbilical cord if it hasn't already broken. I'll add as well, as Cindy Wolf would tell us, to make sure we ID them at the same time. There are multiple methods of doing this, but that allows you to remember how many that you or that doe had, plus identify who isn't eating as well and who's their mom and why. If you're noticing some thin or lethargic kids or lambs, as well as so you can remember who you treated early on in that neonatal period. In thinking about a calendar, spring is busy. Spring is really busy. I don't need to tell you that. But just remember that you have relatively little time to decide whether you are going to do the following management practices. This slide, since we talked about sheep and shearing a lot during winter, this slide is really for, if I had to pick on one subpopulation, I would say this is really for those dairy goat producers. Most of the dairy goat producers will choose to dehorn or disbud kids born. And keep in mind, you only have a limited window of time to decide if you're going to do this or not. Meat goat kids, of course, are dehorned all the time or disbudded all the time. And on the sheep side, you do need to decide relatively quickly if you're going to tail dock. It's a recommended practice here in the US, and we'll talk a little bit more about that on a future slide. The average age for producers to disbud their goat kids is about 16 days of age, so for about 2 weeks old in the US. And this is according to the National Animal Health Monitoring System. Dr. Whitney Nauer at the University of Minnesota is a leading researcher on pain control when disbudding goat kids, and she has investigated the use of sedatives, local anesthetics or numbing blocks, and pain control methods via nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. And we know all of those play a role in mitigating the pain with this procedure. Some of them the producer can give without a veterinarian there. But my takeaway from the research is that no pain control method is 100% at taking away the pain and the stress of this procedure. And your veterinarian may have a preference on when they are going to be most successful to remove your goat kid's horns. I found myself to have a greater risk of horn regrowth the later I was trying to disbud kids, and after a certain point, you just can't remove those horns anymore. With our typical ways of trying to remove them, there are some more advanced procedures, but I tend to think about operator comfort level will tell you how successful this procedure will be. And the age of the kids that you are disbudding will also play a role in how successful this procedure is, i.e., how much regrowth you have after disbudding. So, as a takeaway here, just remember to disbud goat kids. Decide to disbud your goat kids as early as possible. And the recommended practice is 2 weeks or younger for minimizing horn regrowth, but that may depend on the person's preferences who are performing the procedure. Let's get into tail docking of lambs. Lambs are tail docked for a variety of reasons in the US, depending on if you're commercial or show animals. But the main reason here is to control fly strike or maggots from setting up within the wool around the perineum or under the tail. For the control of fly strike, tail docking of lambs is recommended, but at a young age, for the same reasons we highlighted with disbudding goat kids. There is a fine line to walk here between reducing fly strike, but introducing rectal prolapses. And so an easy way to remember, if you're a commercial lamb breeder, an easy way to remember the ideal length is at that distal end of the caudal tail fold. Some people will also say till it covers the vulva. That's going to vary, of course, in our show sheep populations, but this is the time that you need to decide to do it. So we're managing growth of our lambs and our kids, but we're also managing parasites. Really, we're doing that no matter the time of year. Parasites are always going to be there, but we see a periparturient rise around the time of lambing or kidding. And that just means periparturient is around the time of birth. I find that the spring periparturient rise necessitates extra vigilance at this time and selective deworming. Selective deworming would indicate to me that you are utilizing multiple indicators to decide who needs to be dewormed at this time. I tend to think about deworming programs as reducing shedding in my pastures or my pens, or producers' pastures or pens, rather than cleaning up individual animals. If we set our goals to be reducing environmental shedding, we will likely be more successful than trying to eradicate parasites completely. As this isn't a parasite control webinar, I'll list parasite resources at the end. But my goal here is to explain why parasites become more of a concern in the spring and the fall. I wanted to bring your attention to kind of an overlooked parasite besides the barber pole worms that we know cause anemia and blood loss in the small ruminant. This parasite may or may not be overlooked depending on where you are. If you are in northern Minnesota, you're likely already pretty aware of this. But the liver fluke is carried by deer and snails in Minnesota and other states in the US. It's also a parasite that sheep and goats will pick up on pasture. The dewormer that we have available, the dewormers that we have available against liver flukes in sheep and goats in the US targets the adult flukes. And what that means is it only really works once the flukes have been alive for a certain amount of time within the sheep or goat's digestive tract, probably closer to 2 or 3 months. The fluke then has to mature in the small ruminant gut before you can deworm for it. So why are we talking about this in this spring if it's something that they pick up while they are grazing? If you try to deworm for this too soon, you won't get it. And so if I'm deworming for liver against liver flukes in the spring, I'm thinking about it for the past grazing season. I'm trying to target those adult, fully mature liver flukes that the sheep or the goats picked up in their previous grazing season. Meaning, I frequently get asked if lambs or kids need to be dewormed for this, meaning no, until they've grazed for a year. Um, Using a dewormer against liver flukes is not going to be necessary. I mentioned avoiding early pregnancy. If you're familiar with the dewormer valbasin, it's not labeled for pregnant sheep or goats in their first trimester. And so thinking about this in the spring allows us potentially to target grazing dairy does who are nearing dry off, but who are not in their early gestation, in their first month of pregnancy. As you think about managing the growth of progeny, parasites, and pastures, remember just generally speaking, the 4-inch rule to take advantage of the parasite biology. We know that infective larvae of the barber pole worm tend to live lower down. And once the grass gets taller and goats or sheep are munching on the grass up here, they're not picking up quite as many parasites as they would be once the grass is overgrazed. So waiting to turn out your does or your ewes onto pasture until there's ample grass cover or ample grass height is a great practice, not only for control of parasites, but for overall management of the pasture itself. And then don't forget to take advantage of the fact that goats love to browse and don't expect them to eat your beautiful spring lawn in the same way that your lawnmower does. They would much rather love to graze high or browse and in that way save on the transmission of parasites as well. All right, that's spring. Here are some more spring resources for you that have been put out by past Sheep and Goat Extension YouTube recordings, as well as I would love to direct you to wormx.info. It looks like it could be a spam website, but this is actually the best resource for sheep and goat parasite control and research for those of you who are based in the US. Got your pens and paper? What's the one thing that you know you always put off doing in the spring that you can remind yourself to do this coming year? What's your takeaway? Sheep and goat extension folks, is there anything else that you would like to add for spring?
Well, Dr. Varnum, I like the progeny, parasites, and pastures. Way to keep it fun and entertaining right there. An inquiry kind of comes from us that is focused on valbasin and saying, hey, may we or may we not have this? And then also in terms of just recommendations for liver flukes. You did a great job of explaining if and why it's a challenge, but what can we do? So that'll be my transition question here as people get their inquiry and kind of moving forward for spring.
Apologies in advance. I can't find the question, so just let me know if I'm not answering it completely. Yes, this is a hard one this year where you're reading between the lines that valbasin is not currently available to sheep and goat producers, to veterinarians, because of supply issues. So valbasin is not a prescription product, but it's just timing wise, here we are in 2025, we can't get valbasin. And that becomes a problem for those of us managing sheep and goats. Absolutely. The challenge with liver flukes is there's not a reliable test for liver flukes except for on the butcher shop floor. So you really only diagnose them in a dead animal, unlike the barber pole worm that we can try to assess via the fecal egg counts. Liver flukes we have limited products in the US against liver flukes that are labeled for sheep and goats. The mainstay for many years, of course, was valbasin. Some producers right now are trying to do what they can to minimize. They're breaking the life cycle another way. If that is an option for you, it's not always an option. Dewormers, of course, are never 100%. They never have been, and they never will be. They are never 100% successful way to manage parasites. And unfortunately, we are being pushed into that corner now with not having one of our mainstays available. Dewormers break the life cycle by targeting those adult stage worms, but now we're being challenged to break the life cycle in other ways. And so keeping sheep and goats away from areas in which deer or snails are likely to be is one of our next best options, unfortunately, until if or when we have another product available in the US, but that's not looking like it's too far down the pipeline, unfortunately. Let me know if I didn't answer that question completely, and we can sure come back to it at the end of the webinar because I anticipated a lot of questions about those flukes today. All right, so moving on here, of course, into the summer. And my advice, based on helping countless sheep and goat producers. I'd make the rounds sometimes during the summer, just doing some fun hoof trims and other things. But typically, once I got into fall visits, I was thinking back, oh, we should have made some harder decisions earlier. And so, taking it, working backwards here, my one takeaway for summertime is make this the time you make those tough decisions, unless you are already doing a good job of it during another time of year. Summer is about who should you breed? Who should you really keep around? And some of those checkpoints include the eyes, the feet, and the undercarriage, and I'll get into that a little bit more. I just tried to make it more memorable than saying pre-breeding, but that's all that this period is, of course, is pre-breeding management, as well as you're probably weaning your lambs, maybe late summer. What do I mean by checking the eyes? Of course, I mean checking for FAMACHA scores. If that's not something you are already doing or practiced at, there are wonderful resources online, including from U of M Extension, on how to do a FAMACHA score. Something that gets forgotten is the why to do a FAMACHA score. We think sometimes we humor ourselves thinking, well, I'm going to look at the eyes and then I will know who to deworm, and then I will be managing my flock or my herd well. And while that's a great strategy, the FAMACHA system, kind of used in its gold star way, is actually to decide, who are we constantly needing to deworm? Who is constantly running white or anemic? And really the purpose is get them out of your herd or your flock. And so the benefit of checking eyes or checking FAMACHA scores during the summertime is that this is the time that you can make that decision. You know what? I've already treated her 3 times this year, and I don't want to pass on those poor parasite resistance genes and keep those around in my herd or flock. Everyone has a different threshold for that, but this is just a reminder to don't go through the extra effort and labor of doing something in your flock or your herd unless you know what you're going to do with that information. While you're looking at the eyes to determine who's showing a pattern of better parasite resistance, who's got nice bright pink eyes and usually does year round, and who do I want to keep babies from? While you're doing that, check their teeth. Maybe you forgot how old that one is of your that I don't know, that doe that your daughter showed 10 years ago, and she's maybe holding weight well, but you forgot that she was that old until you looked at your teeth. Again, it's part of who should you keep around. Summertime is a great time to trim feet. I mentioned earlier that you can trim feet anytime you have your hands on the animal. It doesn't mean you need to wait until the summertime, but they really need their feet when they're grazing, they're browsing, breeding, or in pregnancy. And so summer is that time, maybe before you kick them out to pasture, before they're being bred, and they're not heavy pregnant and kind of a pain to flip on their butts. Summer is a great time to check their feet and trim. It seems like the more valuable and more of a pet an animal is, the more often they probably need their feet trimmed, and the more crossbred she is, maybe she needs her feet trimmed less. So there is a genetic component to how often your does or your ewes will need to have their feet trimmed. And of course, don't forget about your bucks or your rams before you're turning them out on pasture. Makes it pretty hard to jump on top of females if you can't use your feet. The only thing I'll really mention about weaning, because we have a whole series, a whole webinar series on weaning, the only thing I'll really mention is why that timing of the CDT vaccine is really important in young lambs or kids. Our goal is to have 2 or more doses of CDT into the lambs or kids in the first 3 months. Some producers have higher risk levels and they may be vaccinating them even more times until settling into that once a year timeline for adult animals. At first, especially that CDT, those CDT, let's say antibodies that cross into the colostrum, at first the main idea here is tetanus protection, because we're going to be doing quite a few things to them once they're born. We might be disbudding them, we might be clipping that navel, things that are likely to introduce the Clostridial bacteria into the animal. Later, when we get to weaning, we're changing up the diet on that animal, and that's where the C and the D are really important. That the animal has been from a vaccinated mom, ingested the, let's say, immunized colostrum from that mom or from another mom, and that animal has received a 2-dose series of CDT prior to starting them on that journey of feed change that goes along with weaning, and for meat goats at least, or lambs, going on to full feed. And then lastly, making those hard decisions. I put this picture in even though it's really silly. You might recognize me here. This was me trying to look at some udders after some does were dried off, and I took this picture knowing someday I would have a use for it. Don't forget to look between the legs. Before you turn them out to breed, try to identify which ones had actually dried off pretty well, whose udders are actually looking pretty good, and whose udders didn't fare so well. And do you really want to keep them around? Because you might not be able to actually clear that up. So we're talking about asymmetry here. One side is more firm than the other, scar tissue, pendulous udders, and other things, not active mastitis typically at this time of year. The scrotum, that of the adult ram or buck would ideally be this size or greater, so 35 centimeters or above, maybe closer to 30 centimeters of circumference for a younger buck or ram. But the idea here is, you guys, if you're doing a breeding soundness exam, this is covered. If you're not doing a breeding soundness exam, you can still palpate those testicles and make sure that there are 2 there and that they feel that they feel good and that they're of good size, as as a good indicator, as a proxy, let's say, in your herd if you're not performing breeding soundness exams. Again, that gets back to who should you breed. And then don't forget the 4-inch rule for managing those summer pastures. We've got some resources about drought management for you as well. I didn't know if this would come up about synchronization and flushing. These are practices, pre-breeding practices, which are relatively common here in uh, progressive herds and flocks. Synchronization being reproductive protocols which prepare the does and the ewes for a breeding season, and flushing being a nutritional management strategy pre-breeding in order to increase fertility of those does or their ewes. I'm not getting into details here, but these two things are also, these would take place in the traditional spring lambing system here at the end of summer going into pre-breeding going into breeding season. They're probably even more important if you are trying for some out of season breeding. So those would be more important leading into the spring breeding season leading to fall lambs or kids. And just a reminder that the most successful practices for out of season breeding are good nutrition and breeding management strategies, which are often easier to manage than the traditional seasons. Okay, that's summer. A couple of additional summer resources for you in those weaning management, grazing management, and parasite management themes, as well as redirecting you to that resource for parasite management. Anything to add, team, about summer tough decisions or other management practices that are great in the summertime that we didn't cover for our calendars?
Thanks, Dr. Varnum, for the summary for our summer season. I think an inquiry that we can kind of address here has to deal with our Clostridium perfringens, CD and T. Okay, and so a couple different things, and obviously you said that we can ideally provide it to our ewes, but sometimes we might miss or miss the chance to get it to the ewes. And so even when you think about it, again, the T for tetanus is, as you described, some of the management programs that we use, if it's docking or castration or whatever that may be, the tetanus helps us. And so two-part question is the tetanus portion of CD and T required for the ewes? Because it's not, maybe we could just use C and D then and not need the tetanus, on your thoughts. And then if we missed giving it to the ewes, what should be our first step to provide it? And then obviously anytime that we change the feeds as well.
I'm going to answer that second part first. So if we miss giving it to our does and our ewes, or our ewes, life happens. What can we do then? Are we screwed, basically? And I counsel owners to give it as soon as possible to those lambs or those kids. So the tetanus protection won't be fully on board if you give it the same day as your, let's say, tail docking on, day 3 of life. If you give it that same day, it's not going to be fully protective in that lamb, or I guess in this scenario, that lamb, for a period of at least 3 to 4 weeks. And you're going to need to booster it, of course. But some protection is better than nothing, and you don't truly know if that lamb is going to need a tetanus protection, maybe scraping itself on a metal gate in a month. That tetanus is still really important for that lamb. And then that C and that D, Clostridium perfringens protection, can be achieved through boost to at least a 2 and maybe 3 dose series of CDT, especially in the unvaccinated doe or ewe. So let me put that maybe a clearer way. If your lamb is out of an unvaccinated ewe, you might consider being more aggressive in your CD&T coverage, starting earlier and maybe extending the number of boosters by an additional one. Starting earlier is for the tetanus protection, and extending those boosters is for they don't all respond 100% to every vaccination we give them. It's dependent on a lot of factors. So you're hedging your bets, you're upping your protection by giving it additional times. And then the first question was, do the ewes and does need that tetanus protection? Can I just give a C and D? You can, but I don't see a lot of value in just giving C and D. There is a risk of tetanus even at the time of lambing or kidding. The vulva, the vagina are open to the environment, and any wounds in that area, once the cervix closes, is not a totally anaerobic environment, but it still makes an okay area. If it were a deeper wound, maybe something got roughed up during lambing. If that wound is a little bit deeper and starts to kind of close up anywhere on that external reproductive tract, tetanus can be introduced there. If you are accustomed to managing cattle, you'll know that that's a risk of tetanus in beef cattle is during around lambing, or excuse me, around calving time, from recently calved heifers or cows. And sheep and goats are incredibly more sensitive to tetanus than even the bovine is. And so, in my opinion, I prefer to give C, D, including T, to my does and my ewes. Of course, it also prevents them from tetanus, from death, from tetanus, from just whatever injury from that soil-borne bacteria entering a breach in the skin. That was a little bit of a lengthy answer. Apologies for that, but I'm happy to take other questions or hear from other extension team members who have some management practices we didn't consider. And then we'll start in on the last section here. With no further comments, maybe they're coming at the end, but let's finish this up strong. So, moving into fall, this is a picture I just took out at our place, and it looks like it's a pretty crop picture, but actually behind that is just wetland. And so we'll talk a little bit more about some trends we're seeing here, at least in Minnesota in the fall. Fall is a good time. Of course, you're breeding during this time, but you've set everything up ahead of time in the summer, right? But fall is a good time to think about testing. So, testing for pregnancy, or better yet, for open animals, and testing for forages. And just because I can, I'll mention, whose feet did you forget? And isn't this a nicer time of year to take care of them than the middle of winter? And the doe or the ewe is huge. Um, just reminders, because I know how easy it is to forget. Write down the date you put the ram out. Write down the date uh, you pull him out, and observe for breeding activity. My favorite clients would I had several, but my favorite, I would say, sheep clients, typically once we were getting to those preg tox discussions, it happens. A doe or a ewe was down, and we were assuming pregnancy toxemia. My favorite clients were the ones that could look back and they say, I saw the ram with her on this date. I'm pretty confident we're this close to lambing. Let's cut her or whatever. Let's induce her. So you don't think about how important it is to observe and record when you see them being bred, while they're being bred, but then you sure wish you had later. And then don't forget that if you're leaving the rams out in July and August, you should expect December or January lambs. And so just timing yourself accordingly, removing that ram or that buck 5 months before you'd like your does to be done lambing or kidding, to help yourself, especially if you don't have indoor facilities. Timeline for preg checking. This was a commonly asked question, like when should I preg test? I would start with why. Preg checking has a couple of purposes here. It's not necessarily something everyone has to do unless you know what you're going to do with the data. A couple of reasons to preg check. Maybe you're going to get rid of any open ewes before the winter. That would be a reason to preg check in the fall. Another reason would be to identify who needs more nutrition going into the fall and winter season. So maybe you're going to keep them around anyway, but you can throw the open ones on that cheaper bale, let them graze off a round bale, and like we mentioned in winter, stick those pregnant ones in front of your highest quality hay. The other reason to preg check would be to identify who has twins or triplets or more and allow you to group them accordingly and feed them accordingly, more importantly, to avoid pregnancy toxemia, which is primarily a disease of multiples. The time to preg check is going to depend on your veterinarian or ultrasound technician. You can think about it in terms of about 2 to 3 months after you removed the ram or the buck. Doing it before you've removed the ram and the buck gives you information on that day, but doesn't tell you who might be pregnant for less time than that. We can't detect pregnancies much sooner than about 1 month after breeding. And there's a blood test as well. So ultrasounding or blood testing small ruminants. Some people will do one or the other. Some people will do both. And then while you're drawing blood, if you're drawing blood, you might test for CAE in goats. That's caprine arthritis encephalitis virus, or OPP, ovine progressive pneumonia. Those are lifelong infections that can be transmitted through the colostrum. And so testing now would allow you to cull a positive if that is part of your herd management plan, or manage a positive by removing the colostrum, removing the lamb or the kid born to a positive animal before they nurse in order to interrupt the spread of CAE or OPP. If you're going to do nothing with these results, there's really not a reason to test for them at this time. And then we have to mention parasites kind of year round, but especially in the fall because we're seeing those wetter, warmer falls that add more challenges. It's kind of like a lengthened growing season all around, right? Including for the barber pole worms. And so I'm having people see a little bit more maybe bottle jaw or even just dead animals in those warmer, wetter falls where we're extending their time out on pasture. And I put culling here. It's a real conversation to have based on who's having more trouble, who's less parasite resistant in your herd or flock. We want to breed animals who are more able to resist parasites overall. And then you can deworm for liver flukes in the fall. Just remember that you're deworming for the previous grazing season. So deworming in fall of 2025 would largely be taking care of things that were grazed in 2024 or very early 2025. And don't forget to avoid early pregnant animals if you are deworming in the fall. Forage testing is a great thing to do as you're heading into the winter. More, not so much to pat yourself on the back for the quality of hay that you have, but to know what you lack and know what you're going to have to do about it over the winter. So know where you're going to have to put your money if your forage isn't up to the standard it should be for pregnant does or ewes especially. And there's a video on the U of M Extension YouTube channel on how to test forage for sheep and goats. And this is credit to my my previous boss who would always say, I don't test my forage in order to know what I have. I test it in order to know what is not there and what I need to supplement. So I pass that knowledge along to you. That's it for fall. So a couple of resources for you for testing forage, and then there's a great parasite management series, which will come into play certainly for all of us in the fall. Don't forget to jot down your takeaway for fall. What's that one more thing that always becomes one more thing as you're getting ready for winter that you're going to vow to yourself to do for your sheep and goat management calendar? As I'm looking out at well, I'm not really looking at much of anyone here, but as I would envision all of you around the US, around Minnesota, and around the world, I envision you maybe with your own seasons that you've jotted down of your sheep or goat care, and one thing for each that you maybe you're lucky enough only to have 2 or 3 seasons, but one thing for each that you want to do a better job of, and sometimes it just takes reminding yourself of the why. So with that, I'll open it up to the rest of the questions. And again, I wanted to invite anyone else who is on the sheep and goat team to give their input of production strategies that have worked for them. Maybe not from a veterinary standpoint. Of course, I'm biased in that way based on what my clients ended up needing or learning. And so I invite other comments here too, and then we'll get to the questions. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Dr. Varnum. I'm going to transition it and keep rolling with some questions, and then our talented colleagues that are on can grab them if they wish as well. And in fact, I'm going to start with one, Dr. Varnum, or maybe we will also point this one towards Troy or any of our colleagues. But the question becomes on concept aid mineral, okay? And so even as we talked about the fall kind of breeding program, is that there are different companies that now have minerals that are designed that can kind of help cycling a little bit, and get those animals to kind of get ready. Do you have any experience with some of those mineral or mineral options? And Troy, tag, you're it. You get it next.
I commend, sorry, I can't read who this is, but I commend the person asking this question on being so mindful to their mineral. The goal of the webinar here for me was to remind people to have mineral that is specific to sheep, or to remind people to put out mineral that's specific to their goats. Of course, remembering that they have very different micro mineral needs, and that's sometimes the most difficult part of keeping sheep and goats together. Personally, myself, I apologize to whoever asked this question. I do not have any firsthand experience nor knowledge of the research, more importantly, to share about concept aid mineral. And that is something I'm willing to look into, or we're willing to look into as a team, unless someone has a better answer than I.
Dr. Angela, this is Troy. I not specifically aware of research related to that sort of approach to mineral and vitamin supplementation. I will say, though, that if we look at other species in relationship to some of the mineral options that are available to us that have higher bioavailability, your zinc methionine or zinc polysaccharide. Basically, it's the mineral that is attached to some other nutrient that allows that mineral to make it past the gut and doesn't bind with something that is in the digestive system prior to its uptake. So in essence, you're capturing the value of utilizing that methionine or polysaccharide to actually get it transported across that gut membrane into the system. You can utilize some of these products. My advice would be to consider doing that during flushing, perhaps, and pregnancy, as there has been some work done to actually improve uptake and actual concentrations in things like liver. But additionally, they have also looked at quality of the colostrum. And so those would be things that you could gain from that if we did perhaps better supplementation. This is especially true in situations where we're not supplementing year round, but only seasonally. And that's really when you can capture the full value of some of those chelated minerals.
Thanks, Troy, and I'll kind of summarize some of my thoughts as well. Is that when you get those opportunities to, like the concept aid that even people to describe, is that personally, and some can see this differently if they so aspire, but in order to get products through the markets and have those label claims, it's real. And so I believe in the feed companies that put that research together, that make that happen, and particularly on our goats and our sheep that are used for either seed stock or for exhibition purposes, those that I would work with on breeding and getting those lined up, and embryonic survival, Dr. Varnum, because even as many embryos as that we have, they're in that early part of that pregnancy. We want to make sure that everything we are doing is possibly balanced as best we can from a vitamins and minerals standpoint. And so, to me, the inclusion of the minerals and vitamins and minerals, and even premixes or special minerals that may be better for that, will get a return on investment, because it doesn't take many. Okay, one lamb, one extra goat kid that makes it through embryonic survival that wouldn't have, because of the requirements to the animal or our female, is certainly worth it to me. So I think that there's advantages from that, but also work with other colleagues for us. Okay, I'm going to move on to a next question. And so this one's intriguing at the very least. And again, we have a talented group that will help. And so one of the inquiries, Dr. Varnum, was shearing. Okay, we're going back a little bit, but shearing increased birth weight of lambs. Well, not so much kids of the goats, okay, because we're not, well, unless they're Angoras or Cashmeres, okay? So we're going to keep that one more to a sheep. And so a couple different reasons that, as I understand it, happens. And I think of it this way, even if we have lambs in the summer, and it's not, again, that standpoint, but when we shear, like the lambs that were behind me in my cool picture here, those were shorn ones. You can tell that they were shorn earlier in the summer. This was actually a fall shot. But they increase the amount of consumption, okay? Just from a regulation of body temperature and regulations of their life, is that they increase that the consumption of the animals. Now, if we have those ewes, from what I understand, is that those shorn animals, obviously it's going to take just a little bit more to keep them at a logical spot in terms of maintenance of temperature. And so they'll increase the amount that they'll potentially eat. If they have access to full feed of hay, that they'll increase that and help us from having bigger lambs. This came up, and then I'll pass the torch to you, Dr. Varnum, is that there was an inquiry even from an animal of ketosis or challenges from a feeding standpoint, or if those lambs and or kids get too big. I'm not nearly as worried about it, because we lose so many more from starvation and undernutrition than we would from lambs/kids that are too big. But tag you're it. What do we do? Because we're increasing the progeny size that are coming out in the most commonly the spring. Thanks.
Remember the difference in birth weight and numbers of lambs or kids, litter size, I guess you'd call it. Remember that difference. Birth weight is controlled once the animal is already pregnant in some ways, and you're shearing during that time. And I mentioned shearing potentially impact, or we see it impact birth weights because that that ewe is eating more. She's ingesting more. The act of ingesting more feed during late gestation is the best preventative we have against pregnancy toxemia. So they actually go hand in hand in this way. I believe what the person presenting the question is rightfully thinking about is the risk of pregnancy toxemia with twins or triplets, because those numerous lambs are more at fault for creating pregnancy toxemia than are increasing birth weights because mom was eating more. What happens when you is pregnant with twins or triplets, And she was probably influenced to do that by her pre-breeding nutrition. Once she's already pregnant and we're already at shearing time, there's nothing we can do to to turn one lamb into two, obviously. So once she's already uh if we flushed her and she's got twins or triplets, or if she's just you know, a breed that throws twins or triplets, the best thing that she can do is to eat more in late gestation. The problem with having twins or triplets is they just take up a lot of space, and they take up a lot more space than one really big lamb. Um, and they take up that space and they don't allow the late term ewe to eat. Just doesn't have enough space in there. She can't take in quite as much hay as she would have before she was that big. And so that's when pregnancy toxemia results, is more from multiple animals inside and a subpar nutrition plan. Hopefully that answered the question, and hopefully I read where you were going with that question well, because I think it's a really good one, and I've had a couple of people kind of confuse, like, when should I feed more? I don't really want twins or triplets. I'm gonna feed less because I don't want so many, and you really have to know the timing of that. Feeding more earlier, pre-breeding, can impact your litter size. Feeding more later helps the ewe, plus it can help the ewe not have such tiny little lambs who can't survive.
Outstanding. Thank you. Thanks for that. Okay, and so one of the inquiries that keeps coming up, and you know this as well, is that well, we talked a little bit about the shortage of valbazen, all right, Dr. Varnum, but maybe some people have it, okay, or have it in terms of availability. But a lot of times we kind of think of the risks, particularly in early pregnancy, and then is there a time like beforehand when we could consider providing that? And then the second part is that, let's say even that one isn't available, or some people wish to use dual dewormers, all right? And so the change has came of alternating to both to somewhere in between. And so the first one is when are the safest times that we can provide valbazen to a pregnant doe or ewe? And then the second one is then if we switch to two dewormers, what's your thoughts?
These are really great questions. The valbazen, of course, that's the dewormer, which is labeled for sheep and goats against not only the barber pole worms, but the liver flukes as well. That's not available now. That valbazen carries a label for non-pregnant sheep and goats, and it has not been safety tested in sheep or goats in their first trimester of pregnancy. The label actually says nothing about later pregnancy. I won't say that I've never given it to a pregnant animal. I've given it to plenty of pregnant animals. And I tend to prioritize my thoughts in this way. If at all possible, I will follow the label. Why? Because if something goes wrong and I've aborted an early pregnant animal, I would feel pretty darn guilty about that. And I wouldn't have been making evidence-based choices. If I can, I'll avoid it in pregnant animals. If I can't, I will avoid it in at least the first trimester. And if the risk is really high, you might hedge your bets and try it, remembering that it just hasn't been safety tested in that age. I saw a question about CDT, is how safe is it to give to pregnant animals, and what's the risk of abortion there? That's exactly what we're talking about here. We don't truly know the risk of abortion in the first trimester. Kind of like a lot of things, when that fetus is just, or that embryo is just starting to find where it's going to implant in the uterus, a lot of things can kick that whole system out of play and result in negative pregnancy outcome, open animals. So we try to avoid as much as possible in that like management stuff in that first trimester, just trying to give all of the resources to implantation and making sure that doe or that ewe finally gets bred. But later in gestation is a little bit of a different story. Of course, avoiding, 2 weeks before she's due is not a good time to be doing stressful things to her either. But second or third trimester, you can maybe get away with giving valbasin. And then other dewormers don't carry that caveat. And I think the bigger risk to giving dewormers to pregnant animals is more just stressing them out while you're giving them. So it's stressful at any time to be caught up and singled out, especially if you're a sheep. And so just remembering that what that stress can do to the animal most of the time is more culpable for abortions than the product being given itself. And then combination dewormers, you're correct that giving two dewormers of two different classes at the same time in two separate syringes, but at the same time, is a recommended parasite control strategy now that we have very few dewormers and on the market and even fewer that work. And so that is a strategy. How do you pick which ones? Depends on you, depends on your operation. And the recommendation is to use two different dewormers from a different class. So don't use two avermectins at one time. You're just shooting yourself in the foot. But should you go that route, choose an avermectin and a benzimidazole or something that's in a different class. How do you know what the classes are? That's an excellent discussion to have with your animal care professional, such as a veterinarian, should you have a good relationship with one.
Well, thanks for being our animal health professional, all right, Dr. Varnum, at least through your employment here at the University of Minnesota Extension, but also agreed that we want to, when we're thinking of those decisions, and you know this as well as anyone, we want our veterinarians to know their operation, right? And so going back from a valid veterinarian client-patient relationship of knowing where you're at. The other thing is, even when you think of that from a dewormer standpoint, is that you showed the evaluation on FAMACHA, okay, and looking at those individual eyelids. But obviously, even if you are behind or that you can find animals that are less thrifty, then identifying which ones, right, that we're going to provide that the deworming to, or if we're mass treating those, but there's different ideas and decisions on that. One, I think that comes back just a little bit to also feed additive, but also management of coccidiosis. Angie, is that there is an inquiry on providing decox for the ewes and or looking at even then from the lamb standpoint. And so what's your thoughts in terms of management so that we can stay ahead of coccidiosis for our sheep slash goats?
Good question. Coccidiosis being an intestinal parasite that is present in all stages of lambs, or excuse me, of sheep and goats and cattle too, and other species as well. But here we're talking about sheep and goats, is present in all stages, but it causes the most harm to the immunocompromised or the young who are still developing their immune systems. So why would we feed a coccidiostat, meaning something that slows the growth of coccidia, to a young animal? Well, we'd feed that while their immune systems are developing to help them to fight the infection or the parasite themselves. Coccidia is a protozoa, so it's not really like the other internal parasites, and we're just kind of dampening it down if we feed a coccidiostat. That's a plenty good management strategy, and if you don't have a coccidiostat, you're probably not wrong for considering putting one in the feed of your lamb, of your creep feed, your lamb or your goat feed, but it's you have to have it on board ahead of time. You can't use it as a treatment. There are treatments, but putting a coccidiostat isn't one of them. A coccidiostat is a thinking ahead thing. And the coccidiostat I would recommend would be one in a feed that is labeled for sheep or goats. So I don't like to go too willy-nilly. I like to feed sheep or goat feed, creep feed, and those will have a coccidiostat appropriate for those animals. Why would we feed it to a ewe or a doe? Great question. We think coccidiostats might, probably being a little bit too wishy-washy here. Coccidiostats likely decrease the amount of coccidia that the adult animals are shedding out in their feces, and that's how the young animals pick it up. I think it's an okay practice to do. It's not necessarily recommended for everyone to go out and do that. It's certainly okay to do, but the practice that is the most recommended is to clean up your areas, clean up your lambing jugs, clean up the pens that you're kicking your newborn lamb, your pairs out into, to really limit coccidia the best. The coccidiostat in the ewe or doe feed is only going to take care of so much of the coccidia being shed into the environment. Is never going to be 100%. But if you theoretically prevented every instance of that lamb from picking up any parts of mom's poop, you pretty much solve your own problem. That's not feasible, so we preach hygiene, 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 but the lambs will break with coccidia from dirty environments.
Thank you very much. Appreciated that insight and explanation as you kind of discussed some of our animal health challenges. I think a couple things, Dr. Varnum, as we kind of pull some of this together, and in fact, even we have some inquiries that are truthfully management driven, and again, that's outside the scope of what we're going to accomplish in our last couple minutes of this. But I think when we evaluate and make those decisions, particularly on the health and the nutrition that we have for ewes/does and rams and bucks. Don't forget those guys. See, we made it about through as well. But where they're at in terms of animal health, we've talked about that just a little bit, parasites, and where we can have an impact in terms of measuring those. And then a couple of the questions that have been in there is if and where do we help in terms of either minerals and or what feed stuffs that we have. And so I think that when you even work with that, or if there's neighbors or colleagues in our nutrition and animal health focused people that are part of your program, they can help you out. A couple things, even as we push to kind of the nutrients and said, well, is my hay too good? Is my hay too poor? A lot of the times we don't know what we don't know, right? And so even if we have some of the feeds analyzed, and or if we're looking from the parasite standpoint, looking at the eyelids and the fomacha is gathering enough information to make some of those decisions. And lastly, kind of one individual even asked, how long should we put our rams out for each for 2 cycles or 34 days, and so that depends on what you want to do with your production system. If you want to get those tighter and try to keep and make sure that you can ideally get them in a first cycle or a second cycle, then that so works. If you want to get a higher increase that you actually have that lamb/kid, then maybe you would want to go just a little bit longer in comparison. And so I think what you did is you set the stage very well for the times throughout the year that we can ask those questions. And so we got from, let's help me out here, all right? So in the winter you had feed and CD&T, right? Okay, and so the second one we had our 3 Ps. What's our 3 Ps, Dr. Varnum?
Progeny, parasites, and pasture.
All right, okay. And fall, what did you put as our summary of things to evaluate?
Well, we missed summer, which is when the hard decisions are made.
Oh yeah, sorry.
The undercarriage and the feet. And then fall, yes, fall breeding. Here we are.
Awesome. So thank you, Dr. Varnum, for providing your thoughts. And again, this was a request that we received from a producer, and so we actually have a survey in there in the chat that people can go, and it helped to provide some input and requests for us. And so it's exciting when we can gather that, and we're sitting at the back end with just a smidge over a week left of calendar year 2025. This will be available on our University of Minnesota Extension Sheep and Goat Team YouTube page or site, And also we will have lambing and kidding workshops. And I'll just list those out. January 17 in Long Prairie, January 24 in Owatonna, February 21st in Buffalo, and March 7th in Jordan. And so our team is working the best that we can to help our sheep and goat producers, because right or wrong, they are driven to discover, and through North Dakota State University, we are extending knowledge and changing lives. And so thanks everyone for joining us on our webinar, and thanks again to Dr. Varnum and all of our colleagues that we've got that help to facilitate our University of Minnesota and North Dakota State University extension for sheep and goats. Have a great night. Happy holidays and Merry Christmas.